DJI is better, but I don't think it's fully charged. And annoyingly, if it's not fully charged, it does use more battery than it charges up when using it as a webcam. So let me just go on to here. And I'll get the things up. And then if I set it to live chat, not top chat, and then I'll put it on the screen there, and then I will... all right, Rajiv, I thought today as well, we'd, although it's a bit political, thought it'd be interesting to talk about, all right, Rich, Iran. Because if you've not been following it, and the BBC and that have barely been covering it, they've only really started covering it today, it looks like it's hopefully the end of the regime in Iran. Whereas there's like some of the biggest protests that have ever gone on there, you know, like essentially the what they call the Revolutionary Guard, which are like their equivalent of the SS, the Gestapo. They're sort of stretched too thin, and they look like they're losing control of it. And because there's been a lot of like quite serious protests there before, and you know, like riots and things, where eventually, you know, it calmed down and the government said, all right, we'll listen to you. And then they later on just killed all the people that protested or imprisoned them. And it looks like hopefully this time the people realize that, you know, they can't back down if they've started protesting. So I'm hoping it's the end of the Ayatollah and the Iranian regime. And then, you know, they can actually go to being a good country again, you know, a civilized country. Because, again, it's a shame for the people who are Iranian, because everybody I've met from Iran that's ever come to the UK has been really nice people, and they've obviously fled the Islamic Republic because it's a shithole. So, yeah, you know, obviously I hope people in Iran get the fucking best and overthrow that shitty, horrible government they have. Because the thing is, as well, with the Iranian regime there, it kills a lot of Muslims. This is the funny thing that, you know, where people are like, oh, it's, you know, like Muslim terrorists, and that it is, but they kill loads of other Muslims. So it's, you know, it'd be a good thing for the whole world if the Iranian regime collapses. So I thought that's good news. You know, sadly, I think it is going to be probably people in the streets getting machine gunned and that, but hopefully this time it is the end of that shithole regime. So that's that. All right, Kevin. And this was that compass I was on about the other day. I did get it to show it on camera this time. So yeah, like I said, the only problem with it is the liquid's gone quite dark, but the compass still works perfectly. The tritium on there, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's tritium. If I just check it with a Geiger counter, because if it's tritium, I would barely be able to pick it up. But I'm pretty sure it is tritium. Because I think it would have lost nearly its entire half-life by this point. Yeah, I think it's going to be tritium, because like I said, it has got a radiation symbol on there. But the Geiger counter basically doesn't pick up anything from it. So, yeah, most likely tritium. Where's that little UV torch I had on my desk? Because if so, there it is. Like I said, so like I said, it looks quite good when you actually have the light on it. It's still quite bright, but yeah, like I said, the only problem with this is the liquid's gone quite cloudy. So if you're looking at it under a decent light, you can still read where it says north, south, east, west, and everything. But try and hold it up to a camera is actually quite hard to show it. But so like I said, but yeah, I was pleased to get one of these for 35 quid. Because like I said, on eBay, most of these are bloody what do you call it? Yeah, you can actually see with that how the liquid's discolored. You can see it's kind of gone, you know, where the black light makes it go kind of a blue color, the liquid. But yeah, the bubble in it isn't too bad. It's not disrupting the compass at all. And apparently all compasses have bubbles. I was reading about this. I'll go to your comment in a second, Chris. Apparently all of the compasses have bubbles because it's to do with temperature expansion. So I think it's because the liquid expands when it's hot. You see quite a big bubble when it's cold, and then in a really hot environment, you barely see a bubble. If it didn't have the bubble, it would actually break the compass. Because I did see people whinging online with various things of like, oh, don't buy whatever brand of compass because it gets bubbles in it, where And then people who actually were knowledgeable on compasses were saying literally every compass is going to have a bubble if you're in certain, like climates, because if it doesn't, it's not going to survive very well. I mean, obviously, yeah, some of them are bigger bubbles than others, and you don't want an excessively big bubble, but it's still one of those things. Yeah, I'll have to have a look, Chris. I haven't actually seen, I've seen some footage of people getting like pepper sprayed and that, but I haven't seen ones of that. Is that what state was that? Is it Minnesota that's in? I was just seeing what I could Google to have a look. See if I can get something up now. But like, it's been obviously on the news over here. It was like over that like ice shooting, wasn't it? Of the woman in the car, and then everybody's protesting. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's Chernobyl, like I was saying. But the thing is, they've got a very big population that's pissed off. The government, like I said, the only thing the government really has on their side is guns. But the thing is, like I said, they have both the equivalent the SS Gestapo, don't they? The Revolutionary Guard, which you're on about, and then they have the regular army. And you'd have to just hope if it gets one-sided enough, the regular army turns on the Revolutionary Guard. But like most people think that the Ayatollah, or whoever he's called, is probably going to be dead within a year or two anyway, and then like the regime's going to be quite sort of fragile because of the fact that it's not going well for it at the moment, and he doesn't have a clear successor or whatever. But yeah, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk where they're just going to say, all right, then we'll go. I think they will be machine gunning the crowds of people and everything, but I'm hoping this time that the people realize that don't give in if they say, all right, we'll fix things, because every other time that's happened, they basically break their word a couple of months after the protest die down, and then arrest and kill people that protested. So but I've seen some of these protests are fucking huge, but like I said, the media is not really covering it over here, and I reckon a lot of that is because now call me. Yeah, but again, missiles don't really do much to help you from angry mobs. Like with Ceausescu, all of the army didn't protect him when the Romanian Revolution happened. He did have people that stayed loyal to him, and then they got killed. Most people, saw which way the wind was blowing. And like I said, it's you're not seeing what's happening in Iran, Tropical. Like I said, this might end up being a bit more political, but let's see if I can get the Minnesota protests up anyway, so I can see those gas masks Chris was on about. And again, it might depend on what I'm looking at, because is it National Guard or regular police, do you know, over there? But yeah, I did see some footage of people being pepper sprayed, but on that one it was just like police balaclavas on. It wasn't there's ones with Avon FM53s on in one picture I can see. Or it might be an FM54. And I did see one that had the Avon mask, which I saw when I was talking about Avon masks on the stream the other day. The one with the weird grey like face piece thing, and that's apparently for like riot control but not CBRN stuff. It's like one not built to a CBRN standard. But I suppose if you're a police force, you can buy them cheaper in bulk. I'll just search gas mask after it and see if I can see. Right, so there's one here with a guy with that Avon mask on. There's some with M50s on. There's a thing from before where they've got FM12s, which is pretty cool, because like I said, I like the FM12. Other pictures coming up are guys with M40s on. So it looks like they've got a complete fucking hodgepodge of different masks. I'm assuming it's just literally because at various points, state level and various police have bought gas masks from, different companies. Oh, they were M50s, were they? But yeah, like I was saying, some seem to be M50s, some seem to be C50s. But yeah, it looks like there's a complete mishmash. The 4A1 is okay, but not brilliant. The M15 I really like, and I haven't used any of their more modern ones since. Yeah, Tropical, it's probably a case of every now and then they just buy a load to replace old stock they're getting rid of. So yeah, it's probably that they buy a few dozen at once, based on the order of expiry. So they probably rotate their oldest masks out of circulation with something they buy in, and it's probably, again, either stuff they can buy cheap as army surplus at the time, like a lot of police forces apparently in the US do, with like armored vehicles and things like that, or they probably, see if like someone like Myra goes, oh yeah, we'll sell you these premium quality masks, whatever price. But yeah, like I said, in the UK, most of the police forces use FM12s, but they're not forced to. That's just a thing where it's probably like the best priced thing they can get for what they want. It wouldn't surprise me if some police forces end up with more modern stuff than FM12s, but saying FM12 seems to just be the ones a lot of the police forces have stuck with. But yeah, so like I said, the 4A1 is okay. It's very basic, but at least has straps unlike a GP5. It's way better than something like a GP5, the 4A1, the civilian mask, the older civilian mask anyway. And the M15, I've got an older one that's still very good. And I think the more modern M15s are meant to be more comfortable, have a better voice diaphragm on. And I don't know if the Israeli military ever replaced the M15 with anything, like a more modern mask design. Like US mop suits, you basically never see them in the UK because of, I guess, ITAR restrictions, or they never really get sent over here. Because again, the problem with US surplus in the UK is even stuff that's not restricted, by the time you've paid postage and taxes on it, it's often like double the price of the item. So I was looking today at like the US military compasses, and like US surplus stores that were selling them for like $20 to $30 each for like something similar to this were then nearly $100 for the shipping and taxes. Yeah, Kevin, exactly. So I don't have any US mop suits or whatever. I do have quite a few various NBC suits, if you just mean NBC CBRN suits in general, from different countries. Yeah, exactly, Tropical. I'm just saying it's just one of those things with some US surplus. It's just they never end up, like saying, really leaving the US. But again, you'd probably have similar problems if there was a European suit. If you wanted to get that, you'd probably have the same problem, that the cost of getting it to America would be, unless it's a company, like importing them in bulk to sell a surplus, they're probably going to be more than the suit itself, like, price double for the postage. Sadly, I don't think Saint it's handy at the moment. Like, I don't think it's not that one, is it? Or is it that one? No, that's the Israeli one. No, sadly, it's not handy. I think it's when I actually put in like an outdoor survival bag somewhere, and I bet you now I can't fucking find it handily. It's probably not in this room, in all honesty. But speaking of, just out of curiosity, things like that, where what I did buy today, and again, I'm trying to be careful with my money, so I can't, like I said, buy much at the moment, but I did think it'd be very good for doing a few videos on, is a bit like, how you get the IFAKs, like the IFAK, the individual first aid kits, like that are all pre-packaged in the various price ranges, depending on like how many things in them. I've got a load of those, Saint. The problem is that I've got no more room for any of those, and when something ends up in an organizational box, and then it's at like the bottom of a pile of organizational boxes, it never sees the light of day. Because it's like where people end up saying to me, oh, can you get whatever helmet? And I'm like, yeah, I know that I've got a helmet like that in a plastic storage tote, but the problem is, like, you have to then get to that storage tote. So that's the problem, is when you just get too much stuff, it becomes, unless, like, in an ideal world, I'd have like a big warehouse size thing with racking all the way down it, and then stuff could be done like that. But the problem is, because there's just totes tucked into nooks and crannies, a lot of the time it's, even when I label what's in the totes, and sometimes I know where a particular tote is, sometimes I say, fuck it, I can't be asked to, you know, lift out heavy totes from on top of it to get to one of the ones below it. Like if I've got somebody with me, I've done that a few times, you know, getting stuff out of totes and that. But yeah, the problem is when it's just me, and I'm like, no, because, you know, if you've got like 80 kilos of stuff above it, you don't really want to be pulling all that. But yeah, we've almost got too many organizational boxes as well. It's the funny thing. Like I said, that's why this year I'm just going to be selling a shitload of my own stuff, I think, even if I'm selling it below market rates just to clear up space, even where I won't need the money for some of the stuff. I just want to get rid of some of it. Like I said, it's a shame, but that's the problem. It ends up becoming too hoardery after a while, where, you know, and I think that's the problem, is people forget that when you get stuff to do videos on, you know, that stuff always physically takes up space. And I don't, it depends, because my mum is the worst person in the house for storing stuff in every single room in the house, even though she complains about other people's mess. I'd say my dad is the only person here that is actually very good at, like, you know, being a minimalist. But like my mum is what's the term for it? Pot calling the kettle black, you know, very hypocritical, where she'll complain like, oh, you've got too much stuff, as she, you know, fills up another third of a room with like tools she's bought for like some DIY project and then used them once and then never done anything with them again and stuff like that. And it's like the problem as well, like where my granddad sometimes says to us, like, oh, do we want stuff out of his house? And you're like very politely sort of going, no, because you're thinking, we don't want your clutter to then add to our clutter. What, the 4A1, Jake? Awesome. Because, or like one of the more modern ones, because I know they have like more modern PAPR style ones now. Oh, so with individual first aid kits, you get ones that are like survival equivalents of them. So I bought one of those, you know, where it has like a torch in it, what do you call it, like the glass breaking pens, like, you know, various kind of multi-tools. So I thought I'd get one of those to review. Yeah, probably the 4A1, Jake. If you search Israeli 4A1, as in number 4, A as in alpha, and then number 1, 4A1, see if it's that one. But this is probably a 4A1 that you're on about. So yeah. If it didn't come with a drinking tube, it might not be in proper Israeli 4A1. It might be one of the Chinese rip-offs, but, or maybe they do a load of 4A1s without the drinking tubes. I don't know. Yeah, GP4 for $5 is very good. But yeah, so yeah, so they're set up like an IFAC, you know, in terms of like the kind of little cases they're in. But then it's like I said, it's all various tools. So PPM, ATA, what's that? Gas GP9 gas mask is probably one of the best Soviet masks I've seen. Is that the panoramic one? Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely good for a Soviet mask because it's got an oral nasal cup and a panoramic visor. If you can get one for a good price, then yeah. City Prepper randomly says Muslims. We were talking about Iran earlier, but I don't know how that has anything to do with prep kits and gas masks. Oh yeah, like I said, yeah, so it has the attachment for the drinking tube. That's what I mean, yeah, because the mask doesn't have a drinking tube on it. It's got like a bit you screw a thing onto. Yeah, if it slowly seeps air and it's not obviously conforming to your face properly, or like the voice diaphragm's got holes in it or whatever. And typically I've now had 2 bloody messages as soon as I'm streaming. Didn't have any for the hour before I was streaming. Now I've had 2 people PM me, which I can't respond to because I'm streaming. So yeah, but it's just that typical thing that, you know, it's the sod's law thing that, you know, if you're expecting people to message you or whatever and, you know, reply to them in good time, and then, nope. Yeah. I think with some people, Rajiv, it's a bit like if you want to get a reply from them, you have to do something that's going to inconvenience you. It's like I was trying to think of good other examples of that. That, you know, like where something's not going to happen until you go out your way to do something else, and then it turns up. Like if you walk away from a bus stop and then a bus that's 20 minutes late finally arrives and then shoots off again. And again, another. I'll do a video on that. I haven't got round to filming it yet, but I've got those body armor panels in the other room, and I've got that bag handy. I think as well, Jake, the old design, at least with the 4A1's drinking tube, wasn't like a proper drinking tube, as in people said don't fucking use it, as in, you know, like you're going to compromise the seal of the mask. Oh, are you in Germany, Rowboat Gorilla Man? But yeah, I think it's a shame Germany's getting rid of all the flectons and that just to go to multicam. Especially because at one point they were actually doing a multicam coloured flecton, like called Multitan or whatever, and then probably went, oh no, we will just buy some multicam like everybody else. Zeppelin, it completely depends on the mask. Ones like the GP5 are pretty reliable. PMG ones, not so much because they've got more rubber in. Any Soviet mask that has a voice diaphragm, obviously that's going to be a vulnerable point of the mask. Because if I've got one handy, I can show you. If this, don't know if this one's rusted on or not. Yeah, it's rusted shut. But with any of these, if they get like a little hole in them, then obviously the mask's dead unless you can replace the voice diaphragm. And if it's like this one where the thing's rusted on, then you can't take it off to replace it. So yeah, it, like I said, with Soviet masks, it really depends on the mask. Well, like I said, the problem with the PMG is the PMG has a rubber filter intake rather than the metal one. So depends, Saint. Like I said, if I've got the time to do it at some point and it would be good for a video, I don't see why not. But it'd also be one where I'd have to do it legally, because again, I'm not gonna do any sort of illegal camping on this channel and then upload a video on it. Just because, you know, I know there are channels that do stuff like that, but I always think, how do they then not later on get in trouble if they are publishing a video of stealth camping or whatever? I know it's probably because the landowner would have to prove that it was their land and everything, but that's why I'd be a bit worried about that. No, you don't have the same laws as Scotland, no. I did do quite a lot of camping when I was in Scotland, and again, yeah, it was because there was a lot of places you could just, you know, have right away and camping on, even if you weren't using a proper campsite. Filters on what mask or whatever, or do you mean filters in general? Depends completely, City Prepper, what you're going to be using them against. So again, there's probably charts you can find everything, or ask ChatGPT and it might give you a good answer. But like chlorine, I think, and again, it depends on the concentration of the gas. I think chlorine filters last quite a long time against, but phosgene, for example, it eats through the filters pretty quickly. And I think there were a couple of gases that like destroy filters within minutes. So, you know, it was expected that in a chemical attack, the first gas to be used would be the ones that break the filters down. And then, you know, like 20 minutes later, another sort of gas would be fired over to, you know, finish off the filter and kill the person, if that makes sense. But it's kind of like, how long is a piece of string question, or like how far does a car go on a petrol tank? You know, depends on road surface, the car. Obviously, the bigger the filter, the longer it lasts, and the newer and better sealed condition it is, the better. But yeah, if you're in a really, really thick cloud of phosgene, it's probably only going to last a few minutes. Whereas if you're in a very wide open area with a bit of tear gas floating about, it's probably going to last plus 24 hours. The PBFs are called cheek filter masks. Again, the only problem with, like I said, cheek filters is even if you get one and put the filters in, you can't get replacement filters for cheek filter masks, in the sense that nobody's made new filters for cheek filter masks since like maybe 2000 at the latest. Because again, the US stopped using the M17 around the 90s. Most of the commie countries that had clones of the M17 probably stopped around the 90s or 2000s with them. So yeah, it's one of those annoying things that with cheek filter masks, you can't really ever get new filters for them. Yeah, Kevin, the problem with multicam is now everybody's wearing multicam. It's that thing of you can't tell armies apart by their camo anymore, so everybody has to wear like wristbands and stuff like that. They're safe as long as they're not leaking. M17 filters, as far as I'm aware, never contained asbestos. But M17, yeah, they have chromium. But again, like I've said before, personally, I don't mind using chromium filters, because if you ever look up the stuff on how much chromium needs to leak to give you lung problems, it's basically you'd have to on purposely break the filters and be huffing them like every hour, you know, every day for several years or whatever to give yourself some sort of lung cancer from it. So is it good that filters have chromium in? No, but it's one of those things compared to asbestos, it's such a minor thing. Because again, there were studies done into this, and it's again the amount of chromium that was in filters, you know, and the amount that would have to be leaking, and then the amount of time you'd have to be exposed to it. Well, no, because GP5 filters contain asbestos, and asbestos fucks your lungs up way more than chromium. So it's one of those things where, again, and it's like, even if asbestos filters aren't all the same, like the scariest filters I have that I'd be the worst worried about breathing through for like even 10 seconds is the British World War II filters that had the huge amounts of blue asbestos in. Because blue asbestos is like the most dangerous the asbestos is, you know, in terms of like how much one little bit fucks your lungs up. Yeah, so yeah, you're worried that you're going to have a spunk bucket hostage mask. Yeah. What? Sorry, did you buy for $30, Jake? If you're on about the the 4A1, then yes, you could use that absolutely fine. Like I said, just keep the air drinking tube it sealed on it. If you don't have the drinking tube attachment. Yeah, the Israeli one. Like I said, the 4A1 is absolutely fine. It's just it's like not one. I've got loads of masks. It depends what masks you're particularly asking about. But I don't know if I've got anything interesting to show right now. That's the problem. You know, it's one of those sort of things like that. But yeah, the 4A1 used to be a mask I quite recommend to people, Jake, when it used to be really easy to get at a good price. But the problem is, at least in the UK, they ended up being what do you call it? Like, you know, at one point they used to be like £30 each, you know, around $30, which was great. But then, you know, I've never seen them at that price again. I rarely see them. So it's one of those things that, you know, if they were that price, I'd recommend them still. But now that they cost, you know, like £100 plus, and people ask them, like, no, you can get way better stuff for that price. CFF3s, they're the old French filters, aren't they? They're completely safe as far as I'm aware. I do somewhere. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, the what do you call it? The one that's like that thing of, oh, a tiny bit of something is good for you. I'm trying to remember what is it homeopathy? I'm trying to remember the name of it. But yeah, the thing of, wow, it only has a trace amount of poison in, therefore it actually makes your body stronger. But yeah, if I can find it, because again, it might be locked in one of the safes with radioactive materials, and again, then it's kind of a bit of a problem digging through that just to find them. But yeah, I could check it with either the radio code or the meso. That's a good point. What's my favourite gas masks? Avon C50 is the same as last time, I think you asked. War 2. If you mean World War 2, I've got a load of World War 2 masks. But again, nothing I can really conveniently get out at the moment. Again, the problem is when I'm doing a stream like this is I have to get up to get stuff, then I have to put it back away. So I'm not getting any World War II shit out at the moment. No, never heard of anyone getting a North Korean gas mask. I'm sure they have left North Korea now and again, but if you're vaping through the filter, I think most of the vape stuff wouldn't be getting to your lungs. Because if you had a proper CBRN filter on it, I'm sure Rowboat Gorilla Man, like most of the charcoal in the filter is going to be absorbing the vapor. I've got bayonets, yeah, again, where I'm doing this stream, I'm not getting all this stuff out at the moment, especially because at the moment, how I've got my phone propped up, if I knock it over, it's going to screw up the stream. Depends how they're sealed, Tropical. If they're sealed well, like really, really well, they might be good for about 20 years. Again, I can't ever say to people, trust your life on something like that, even though in some of my bug out kits, I've got well-sealed expired filters and I trust them myself. But like, you know, I can't say to other people, you know, trust your life on them. But yeah, personally, if I have something that's really well sealed and within 20 years of its expiration date, I don't see why it wouldn't be good, especially the ones that, you know, are an airtight foil seal. No, I haven't had any of the rifle type scope ones. No, I think the Norks have some of their own things because, Kevin, I think in one of the parades they did like a couple of years ago, they had a load of guys in gas masks goose stepping and they did look kind of like their own unique thing. Like not Soviet and not Chinese stuff. Like I think it was a domestic mask because they have some weird domestic guns as well. But then you never know as well for the parades if it's something that actually works or it's just something they made to look like a cool costume just for the parades. Because that's the thing with like countries like North Korea when they have those parades. You never know how much of it is just like prop stuff for looking cool on camera. I've got a South Korean K3, which is a weirdly... Did have that behind me not too long ago. But the K3... It's Washida, isn't it? The K3, like I said, is a weird one because it's where they've basically cloned a C50, but like the C50 or an M50, more like the C50 because it's 40mm, but it's not got the panoramic lens of a C50 and then the M50, and the plastic on it is really crap quality. The rubber's absolutely fine, but the plastic, like the eyepieces scratch super easily, as in like, you know, if you had it in a satchel bag, like it rubbing against the fabric of a satchel bag might scratch the eye lenses. Yeah, Daniel, that will depend what country you're in, because often what surplus you can get depends where you are. You can get, and again, unless you're in America with a lot of the sanctions now, but there are actually some pretty good Chinese industrial masks that are sold quite cheap. The the Volkston one, or all of the Volk masks I bought, I got off eBay at various points. The VM37, the VM40, and the VM44, I all got off of eBay. So yeah, in Slovakia, you might be able to get the this fucker, the OM90 from Czechia or the Czech Republic. At a good price, because in America, Myra resell these at stupid prices for what they are. But if you're in Czechia, they might actually be, or sorry, Slovakia, you might be able to get these quite cheap. Right, I doubt they are, but I'll look them up. So Super Gum 4A1. Oh, actually, saying that, there's a gas mask online museum that it has a thing from dated 2002. So Shalon Chemical Industries Limited and Supergum Industries. So yeah, maybe they are, sorry. It's just I've seen loads of names like that, which like the knockoff Chinese brand ones. Yeah, again, if you're in Germany, that's the thing. Like I keep saying, with all this sort of surplus stuff and antiques and everything like that, if you're in the country something originated from, and they've not all left the country because of some weird, like, ruling type thing or whatever, generally you can pick up stuff from your own country quite cheap, even if it's unobtainium elsewhere. That's pretty cool, Daniel. I've got a really nice uranium glass thing over there I found on like Etsy or Vinted or somewhere a while ago. And it's one that for uranium glass is quite spicy. Like if you put a sensitive Geiger up to it, like not even a spectrometer, it's almost 2 microsieverts next to some areas of it. And under UV light, it's the one I did a video on. It's very bright green. Because some uranium glass is such small amounts of uranium in, it looks cool, but it's, you won't really ever notice it even with a detector. Well, that might be looting, but if they're just there rotting, I don't see why not. Because again, in some countries, stuff like that, yeah, just ends up literally rotting away, doesn't it, where it sits in bunkers. Yeah, XM28 circle. But yeah, as Chris says, the problem is if you can't legally be there, you could technically be, looting or stealing, or whatever the legislation is, breaking and entering and then stealing. But if it's literally one of those sort of places where, depending on the laws of where you are, it's just completely abandoned, people are just breaking in all the time and smashing stuff up, it's probably better, I would say, at least in my opinion, let's say my opinion, not necessarily legally speaking, it's probably better you take the stuff than just some crackhead, pissing all over it and ripping it apart. Oh, it says there's a message held for review, but I bet I won't be allowed to approve it. Weirdly, Robo, that's something I try and approve, but I think YouTube policy, that's why it's hidden your comment, because YouTube is very anti-gun now when people talk about ammunition and stuff like that. What, in terms of working Zeppelin, or what's in them? With NATO Stanag filters, really depends which country made them and how they sealed them up in terms of how good they are. And obviously with chromium and asbestos and stuff like that, the really old 60mm filters normally have asbestos in, that like the USM 9A1 had and the British 60mm filters had. Finnish 60mm have chromium in, but not asbestos. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Nearly everything that's like a post 1980s NATO 40mm filter, for example, is going to be completely safe. It's just a case of assuming it's not actually leaking, because again, any filter that is literally leaking the charcoal and whatever the hell else out, if you're breathing it in, is not good for your lungs. So that's the thing, is always check the filter isn't leaking before breathing through it. But yeah, most like 80s and 90s NATO filters of any sort of country, as far as I'm aware, are pretty much completely safe in terms of contents, as long as they're not leaking. Tyronics, is it a case that it's an old civil defence shelter for those apartments? If so, that's probably still meant to be kept for the apartments, is it? Is it a case of the government in the particular country or whatever isn't maintaining it anymore? Why would you want to take a bite when you look at a VM filter? Right, cheers, Daniel. Do you know what actual model of filter it is, or any, like, what color it is? If it doesn't have a date on it, I'd be more careful. And again, generally the older style filters look clunkier than modern ones, as in, more modern filters tend to have that more kind of uniform look to them. Does that make sense? Because what I mean is, like, if you look at the old French 50s filters, which I probably wouldn't personally breathe through, compared to their filters from like the 80s, they have a very different look to them. The older ones don't look as uniform. They look kind of like egg-shaped. But what you can do is, I found this works really well with some things, doesn't mean it's going to work with this. Take some photos of it and ask ChatGPT what model of filter it is. Because I found when you sometimes take pictures of old circuitry, ChatGPT completely correctly identifies certain electrical components. So it surprised me with stuff like that. if it's a training filter, it's probably one that's just like a particle filter for, like, you know, tear gas, or just to get people used to putting filters on and off or whatever. So yeah, I'm just gonna have a look to see if there's any more news coming out of Iran, because like I said, I was talking about that at the start of the stream. But what was I going to say? That the BBC and lots of things have barely been covering it. And my suspicion with stuff like that is I don't think in Western countries they want people to, know about people overthrowing governments. Because I've noticed when there has been successful overthrows of governments in various countries, lots of media doesn't, publish it. Like if it was people protesting against Trump, say in America, I'm sure they'd love to cover it for days and days and days. But if it's people successfully overthrowing a shitty regime, they don't cover it, because then people might say, oh, maybe we could get rid of Keir Starmer in the UK. And I'm not calling for violence there, but I've seen other people bring this up, that, they probably don't want you in Western countries, knowing that lots of these governments, which are going to be less willing to shoot at people and that, probably aren't invincible if people got angry enough and protested for long enough. Yeah, exactly. The message is what, however you want to say it. Yeah, that's the problem with a lot of media stuff. And that's, again, I'm not sponsored by Ground News. I've never used them, but I've heard that's why sites like Ground News are kind of good, because you kind of get a bias sort of indication on, what a news site, how they cover stories and whatever. So yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff from Iran, on Twitter the last week or so, when a lot of the media wasn't covering it, and the BBC only started covering it today in the UK, even though a lot of this has been going on for 3 weeks maybe now, and every day it's looking dicier for the regime, as in they keep taking the internet down, because when they shoot protesters, they don't want the footage to be shown online, get uploaded, that kind of stuff. And there's more footage of government buildings being burnt down and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really fucking big crowds in some of the places. Warning, this video contains distressing images of injury and death. Don't see any injury. Oh, it's because they've censored the footage so much of the bodies that the entire bit is just a blur. Oh, thanks. That's no point even showing it then. But I have seen the raw clip of what they're on about. And yeah, there was a load of protesters that had just been gunned down, unsurprisingly. What interests me, though, is when you see the flagpoles where people have taken down and ripped up and burnt the current Iranian flag, and they've put the old Shah flag up. And it's kind of like, I'm surprised people still have that flag laying around, that the Gestapo there haven't actually found and killed them already for having that flag. Because I don't think it's you can get a TMU, maybe you can get a TMU Shah flag, and put it up and get it through customs in Iran. I don't know. I very much hope Trump doesn't annex Greenland. I've played all the Stalkers, and I like all the Stalkers. Stalker 2 is, although Stalker 2 I think is very good, the problem with Stalker 2 is that because they didn't finish it properly, at the point of release, it was very buggy when it first came out, and every couple of months they do an update that fixes a load of issues that, you wish were fixed at launch. But Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, Clear Sky, and Call of Pripyat are all very good and have loads of mods for them. Stalker 2 is one that if you get it, the longer until you play it, the more polished it is, kind of thing. Oh, I've got surrounded, but barely played it. There's rumors, Ninja Man, that he's fled to Russia, probably to live in the cuck bunker with Putin and Assad. Yeah, I wouldn't breathe through an M53 filter, Kevin. That was what I wanted about. Is that the one that looks like kind of round and then it goes up kind of like a triangle? Because there's pictures of French troops in the fucking Gulf War wearing those. And you think, you poor bastards, you're wearing all of the heavy rubber NDC suits and these masks, and you've been given an ancient filter that's probably long since expired. So, it's one of those fucking things of, you know, what do you call it? Like, yeah. Oh, you can go to the front and wear all the NBC gear, but no, you cannot have a new fitter. That is too expensive for the French army. Yeah, well, they moved, James. They had to they moved to Prague because that was the thing. They had to move all their development studio and everything. But yeah, they had to release Stalker 2 at the point that, you know, like they would have gone bankrupt or whatever. That's why well, they ended up not needing them, but the problem was they thought Saddam might have, because he used chemical weapons against the Kurds and the Iranians in the Iran-Iraq war. They were worried that he'd use chemical weapons against like the NATO troops in the Gulf War. So, or whatever the coalition was called in the Gulf War. So you can see all the pictures of like the US troops and M17s and the British troops and S10s and everything. Yeah, that's the one, Kevin, I definitely wouldn't breathe through. And again, Jake, if there's dints in the filter, it doesn't mean the filter's broken, but you ought to be more suspicious of it, if that makes sense. Yeah, again, it's because it's a weird media thing. It's like, yeah, you won't turn into Spider-Man, you'll turn into Cancer Man, you know. You'll turn into Ouchie Man. Yeah, like if you look up Ouchie, he definitely probably wished he turned into Spider-Man, not the human pepper army man begging for death. I'm trying to have a think, Ninja Man. Project Zomboid probably actually does. The one I'd say is the most realistic, but doesn't really have combat in. There's some wild animals in that. Is The Long Dark, because The Long Dark is very good about, you know, like having to eat lots of calories and layer up for the cold and like avoid wind chill and dampness and that. I'm trying to think I'm just trying to think now if there's any that aren't too like fantasy kind of survival-y games that you'd learn something from. Like Armor 2 and Armor 3 and stuff like that, you learn some basic infantry stuff from. Because there is a version of Armor that's made for militaries as a training sim. I can't remember the name of it now, but like Bohemia Interactive do Armor kind of as the civilian gamer version, and then they do like a proper version for militaries. Oh yeah, State of Decay 2 is, yeah, I quite enjoyed that, but the other one a bit like that is Days Gone, which I quite liked, the one with the motorbikes in. Yeah, Chernobyl show's very good. Again, there's some bits in it that aren't historically accurate, but as a 5-part miniseries, it's very good. Yeah, but there's also loads of single-player missions for Armor Ninja Man. Well, there's different masks and different suits in different bits of it. Like, there's a guy who goes, "It's not 3 Rodgun, it's 15,000," and he's got a PBF on, yeah. But most of the guys in it have like PMG2s, you know, GP5Ms, or the little like Fout masks, don't they? With the, you know, like essentially the masks that aren't going to give you much protection. I mean, the little one that's just a little face filter one isn't too bad if it makes a good seal. But yeah, the ones you're a poor fucking liquidator if you've had to wrap a bit of cloth around your mouth and then you're told to go on the roof. I thought of Chernobyl though the other day when there's a video that came out of Ukraine the other day where the Russians are boasting about this like UAV thing. What's the UAV called? Because A is for aerial, so it's not. Is it UGV? You know, like the little kind of Goliath style things. And they've got one that's loaded with supplies. They're going, oh, like this is for our guys at the front, so we can drive this to them, you know, and where it's completely safe. And it literally gets about 20 yards and it blows up on the fucking landmine. And I immediately made me think of tell fucking Gorbachev from Chernobyl. You know, that robot was never going to work. They gave him the propaganda number. Yeah, well, I mean, the new Stalker game, like I said, it's certainly not a bad game. Like I was saying, the only problem with Stalker 2, like I said, is because GSC had to release it before they wanted to, because of, you know, like money reasons, it wasn't that polished at launch. and Russians review bombed it as well, you know, or like Kremlin bots, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure lots of actual Russians just probably wanted to play the fucking game. So you had the problem where like people were upset at how it was at launch, and you know, like the Kremlin gremlins were review bombing it. So lots of people said it was bad because of that. Censorship. Is there censorship in it? I know they re-released the original Stalkers and some of the Russian stuff was taking out, but I didn't think there was much in Stalker 2 where there's like stuff that's removed, if that makes sense. Deep South accent, probably not, sir. Again, sometimes the weird thing is there's some accents I can take the piss and do, and then sometimes I can try and do that same accent and again horribly fail. So with Deep South accent, that's when I have to pretend I'm in the American Civil War. But that's probably awful. But yeah, well, I've also seen a lot of the Russian mill bloggers are now really pissed off with the Russian government because of the fact that you know, like America could actually pull something like that off. You know, they could seed properly, they could go in on a raid, you know, go in and get out. Whereas, like, again, Hostomel and the Russians did it was a case of a bridge too far rather than, like, you know, a proper heliborne raid. At the moment, it's miserable for both sides, but I generally think Ukraine is going to win, but maybe not get all their territory. Like, so essentially, like, for Russia, like, so again, it depends if you're talking about Russia or Putin, but like Putin, again, how are they winning very slowly, Stalk? Because this is what I'm going to get at, right? Depends on what country you're in, Polska and the model, because again, in the UK, some are legal, some aren't. So what's happening in Ukraine is basically Russia is butting its head against a front line where they very slowly take land, but they lose so many fucking men to take a pointless fucking village somewhere. Again, Russia is winning. What? Because you listen to people online. Well, taking lands that isn't useful for them. All right, okay, so right, let's explain. So you win a war, right? By basically, you could win a war through complete attrition, or you win a war basically through taking everything. But normally what happens with a war is one side gets so fed up that you come to like a negotiated agreement. What the problem is with Ukraine is Putin basically is stuck in the war now. So because of the fact that he basically can't claim victory of what he yeah, but some of the land Russia's taken, they've already re-lost to Ukraine. This is the problem. Russia had more land in 2022 than they do have now because Ukraine retook a load of it. So yeah, this is what I'm kind of agreeing here with what Bit Crusader is saying, that it's if you're either a Russian or Ukrainian, it's fucking horrible for you because, you know, the war is fucking miserable. And, you know, like I said, it's kind of like two exhausted people slogging it out at the moment. Well, again, Russia's already run out of troops because, again, the problem is that Ukraine hasn't even conscripted people that are 18 years old, and Russia officially hasn't conscripted people, but they're running shorter and shorter of people that are willing to sign the death money, basically. So so basically, like I say, the problem is with this war is it's got to the stage now where nobody is really taking land or taking land, you know, as a thing that means anything. Because, like I said, Russia loses so many men to take such a small amount of land that I think where people have worked it out that Russia would have over 100 million casualties to take all of Ukraine at the rate they're doing it. So what, you know, if Putin was somebody that could, you know, win the war by basically saying, I'm just keeping what I've got now and going to negotiations, he could probably do that and win to some degree, right? But the problem is that he basically knows he's a dead man if the war ends how it is at the moment. Yeah, it has been going on since 2014. Again, people forget that first it was the little green men and everything else. And so what I genuinely think is going to happen is at some point Putin is going to die or be couped, you know, and again, that's why he's got all the security thing. Yeah, Ukraine is a corrupt country and Russia is a corrupt country. Ukraine wants to become less corrupt. Russia isn't going to get less corrupt with Putin in charge. So Anyway, getting back to the point, because I don't want to keep getting distracted when there's random comments to do with that, is what was I getting at? Sort of two basically exhausted people slogging at each other. That basically Ukraine, for the most part, doesn't retry and take land because they know the casualties are too high to do it. But Russia's thing is, because Putin can't settle for what he's got at the moment, Ukraine probably is laundering money. But Russia does shitloads of criminal things. Again, there is clearly a side that's a bad guy in this war, and it's Russia. And it's when you sort of hear some of the Russia propagandist points, it's kind of like saying, if was Britain bombing Dresden, did that make us the bad guy in World War II? No, it fucking didn't. But again, is there any proof of that? Because this is the thing that you keep hearing stuff like, there was one thing for ages where it was Ukraine is selling all their guns to the cartels that was never proven. I'm thinking so, James, or it's people that have just believed their talking points without. So yeah, let's start talking about the stuff we are actually talking about. Come and see is good, yeah. So the problem is Putin is basically fucked at the moment, because what's happened to him is obviously he can't really sell how he is at the moment. So he's sort of stuck in this forever war where he can stay alive and keep going if he's at war, but he can't really claim a victory with what he's got and say, I completely fucked the economy and turned it into a wartime economy. Have they? Is there any proof of that? Because again, a lot of this is, seems like that I'm just going to keep throwing information out there. You have to then disprove kind of thing. But Ukraine is really fucking up Russia's oil industry now, with like half of their refineries have basically been damaged to some extent by Ukrainian drone attacks. And where the price of oil per barrel is going down and down at the moment, and Russia's output is getting worse and worse, their economy is getting worse and worse for that reason. Again, I don't think Russia's going to instantly collapse because of that, but it's this sort of thing where some people don't even seem to consider, how is Russia's economy going to go? But essentially what you've got with Ukraine is, like I said, I think there's enough European countries that are willing to donate enough equipment and money that Ukraine will keep going, even if it's suffering. Russia, I think, is going to get to the stage where everything suddenly isn't fine anymore. I think if it gets to the point, because like years ago, if you said to me, would Putin go into Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania, I'd have said no. But now I think if Putin thinks, if I can survive because of perpetual war by going to there, yes. So yeah, this is the thing. What was I saying? I can't remember what thing. Yeah. Again, Ukraine's economy is fucked, but they're getting foreigners giving the money, like everywhere in the EU and Canada and whatever else. Who's giving Russia money? Other than the fact they sell cheap oil to people. They're one of the most sanctioned countries on earth, and they don't really have a proper income stream. And what's bad for Russia is they've had a massive brain drain of talented people leaving Russia, like where we were speaking about radio codes before. They used to be made in Russia. They're not now because the people who made them left Russia. There's lots of stuff like this where lots of the bits of the Russian economy that's still kind of working at the moment are a war economy. If they suddenly went into peace or like some sort of stalemate, that industry would fucking collapse. China sells stuff happily to both sides, Peppy. China doesn't really care. I don't think China really wants Russia to win, but they don't want Russia to lose. Because one of the things with China is a lot of people, although like obviously most people think China's going to maybe go for Taiwan, there's also a very kind of likelihood that they might go for bits of Eastern Russia. But yeah, Caesar, I could easily see them doing another little green men thing of saying, oh no, these Russian-speaking people are being oppressed in whatever bit. We had to send in our peacekeepers, and then, oh no. So it depends, Biscuit Crusader. Some Chinese stuff is genuinely good. Some Chinese stuff is crap, a bit like equipment from a lot of countries. again, it's like with the gas masks. Some of the higher tier Chinese ones are genuinely good. You know, like, again, some Chinese stuff, we don't know how good it is or bad because it's never really been used in a war. So, you know, because there was a lot of Russian equipment that people thought was really good on paper. And then it turned out that, you know, the soldiers weren't trained to use it properly, or bits of it had been sold off due to corruption, or it wasn't maintained. Yeah, Kevin, although a lot of people think with, again, Taiwan, that China will just keep putting more and more pressure on them and then say, don't you just want to be reunified without a war? And, you know, keep applying pressure that way. Right, the guy that keeps making Russian talking points, I am pretty sure now, like some people said, is a Russian bot. Because it does seem weird that you have all the Kremlin talking points. I don't know, I'm just bringing them up. So, yeah. But like I said, it's not good for Ukraine in the sense that, you know, lots of Ukrainians have been killed. You know, if you're in a Ukrainian city, you get nearly nightly slammed into by drones and missiles. But yeah, look, thing is, James, I like to normally take people at good faith that they might have just, because again, how a lot of Russian disinformation works is they just spew out shitloads of talking points, even if they're not true. So people say, well, I've heard that somewhere, you know, but it does get to a point where if people are repeating nothing but what the Russians say, that you kind of think, yeah, maybe you are just a bot. Although I've actually seen a lot less Russian bots recently, and that might just be because of all the internet outages they keep happening and having, and maybe the troll farms, they can't afford to pay as much, or maybe they'll just mobilize the troll farms at some point. But the Earth is hollow, not the Earth is flat. The Earth is flat was like the big go-to conspiracy a while ago. The Monolith in Stalker, which Stalker game? In the older 3, they have the same masks the other factions do, just slightly different coloured. So they have the FM12s, the 2 filters, or the S10s, whichever one it is. The thing that looks kind of like an M40, the XM40, I think it technically is. They also have the PBF-looking mask that isn't a PBF. Oh, Doom guys, somebody else brought up OM90s earlier. But yeah, I haven't seen enough clips. Like I said, if somebody was able to say this news website has a clip where you can see the, you know, the thing, I want to have a look. But it wouldn't surprise me if I know a man in Myra does a great deal. You know, Myra gave me this money into my personal bank account, so Ice needs to buy these. Yeah, well, the thing is, I really wonder with Donald how much of it is him just wanting because he prefers Putin and maybe is getting money from Putin, or how much of it is eventually he's just going to get pissed off with Putin. Because the thing is, like, I think at one point Trump, in good faith, just thought maybe if you kept trying to negotiate with Putin for long enough, he would want to come to the table, but he just doesn't. Every time it's, oh, we can't have peace negotiations because of something else. Like I said, if Russia was winning, they could have just said, the territory we've got now, we're just going to own that now. And again, the thing is with peace talks and that, is both sides have to agree to come to a peace or whatever, or a surrender or whatever. If both sides are happy to keep fighting each other, or not happy, but, you know, you're not actually going to get a peace. Because even if Russia says, right, that's it, we're claiming his territory, if Ukraine says we're going to carry on fighting, then it doesn't work out for Russia. Yeah, again, that could be very well true, Explorer Chernobyl. I couldn't possibly comment. I wouldn't know. As long as you didn't start singing some sort of older German music, Rowboat Gorilla Man, I think you'll be all right. But yeah. The Lada Neva I kind of liked. But yeah, I have heard that Japanese like 4x4s or whatever are much better. The kind of cars I really like are the really compact 4x4s. And I don't mean like soccer mom SUV type things. I mean, you know, like where I'm trying to think, a bit like the Lada Neva, but you know, and a bit like, is it Jimmy or something like that is one of the Japanese company that does these sort of things. but you know, like just a compact 4x4. Let me have a look at the Suzuki Samurai, but it could be very much that kind of car. Yeah, very much a Suzuki Samurai. That's the exact kind of car I'm on about. I mean, ideally, I prefer one with 5 doors, you know, like an actual one that's more like a regular hatchback. But yeah, very much just a compact 4x4, not a great big Land Rover or Humvee looking thing, just a lightweight 4x4, so it has low ground pressure. Well, Fiat Pandas are normally 2-wheel drive. You can probably get them in 4-wheel drive, a bit like when I had a Dacia Sandero, I had a standard 2-wheel one, but they did do a Sandero in 4-wheel drive. You know, I think a lot of companies now do 4-wheel ones, but you need obviously one that's actually a proper, good, well-made 4-wheel drive, not just a car company saying, oh, we did one in 4-wheel configuration. Because if it's not a good enough engine for it, or the weight isn't, you know, distributed right, doesn't matter. Dodge Ram, let me look that up. Probably fucking huge, is it? Yeah, that looks like a big car. Yeah, big fucking truck, pickup truck. Have you got a 50 BMG mounted to the back of it, or something similar? Someone near me, I don't know if they still live near me because I haven't seen it in ages, used to have a fucking huge pickup truck. You know, like before any of those became popular in the UK. I can't remember if it was a Chevrolet or like a big Ford one. But, you know, like one of those ones that, you know, wouldn't look out of place anywhere in America. But when you saw it parked on like a village street and it was like the size of 2 regular cars. Well, you could probably fit somebody in and out the boot, but yeah, that's one of the things I don't like, because it's one of those things where, yeah, they call it 5-door, don't they? 3-door or 5-door, whereas in reality it should be 2-door or 4-door, because the boot should be its own thing. I know of a hatchback you could actually have a chair folded down and you could climb in and out of the boot that way, but you know, it's not a good way to actually get in and out of the car, is it? And I don't think it'd be very legal to say, oh, I'm just getting road legal to, oh, that's my access in and out point in the car. That's pretty cool. The zone is better. Again, as long as it's legal where you are, I don't care. It's just I have to be a bit careful on YouTube if I say I approve of something that might be illegal somewhere. But yeah, a vintage military vehicle I'd really like, you know, if it's one of those things of money was no object, fuel economy was no object, and, you know, the case of like, you know, getting spare parts for it to keep it running. Because again, part of the problem with some of the vintage military vehicles is, you know, people don't drive them very often because of the fact that, you know, you have all the problems. Either you need like the right kind of weight class to drive it if it's so big and heavy that, you know, it's like a little tank, or the issue that, you know, if the parts wear out, good luck finding the spares or somebody who's skilled enough to replace them. But a Humber Pig, so if the people don't know, look up a Humber Pig. It's a bit like a BTR 152, because I really like the BTR 152 as well. But the Humber Pig is it actually 4-wheel drive, the Humber Pig? Um, um, I don't actually know if the Humber Pig's 4x4 or not. Apparently only goes up to 40 miles per hour. But like I said, the Humber Pig I really like. It actually looks quite comfy if you see in the back of a Humber Pig and it's in good condition. That sounds overpriced as fuck, yes. But again, it's your money. If you want to spend it like that, go ahead. But I know the SF10 is worth a lot more than the proper S10, but in all practicality, it's not really much of a different mask. Again, the outserts and the flash hood, if you're in the UK, you can now and again find those for not too much money. But Right. Radio him before I go off, operator. Let me see if I can work out what you're saying. Your gas one thing is a bit as weird sings on it. What do you say? Weird? Which signs do you mean, or do you mean it makes a weird noise? It could be because again, there was obviously Poland used them under a different designation. So with a load of the 41s, again, you said the sings. That's not how you spell signs if you mean the writing on it. But if you mean the text on it, because East Germany used them and they were exported to East Germany, they'd have had not the Russian alphabet on, rather like Cyrillic. They'd have been translated. Yeah, universal carriers are great. And yeah, like Estonia and that used them, and Poland had the version with the silver bits on, the white rubber and the silver bits on. That's East German. The Piff helmet isn't, but the mannequin's got an East German jacket on an MM1. Pretty much every other variant is worth more than the S10 because the S10 was a really common one. But anyway, I'll be off in a minute. But yeah, the Humber Pig is quite a nice interior. But yeah, the BTR 152 is, like I said, I like. But the BTR 152 is where the Soviets had loads of Lend-Lease half-tracks. And then they just did a version of the half-track where it's got 4 wheels at the back as opposed to the tracks. So it's literally the US half-track, but with a wheel configuration. I've always really liked the BTR 152. And I think it was Vietnam has a load where they've actually, upgraded them and retrofitted them and everything, where they've obviously put better engines and stuff in over the years, but they've actually put an armored roof on them and a proper back door. Because the 152 has like one of those weird, it's still designed that people like hop off out the side. Again, James, hard to know at the moment. Once I've been doing it for a month or two, I should get a more steady idea on what the income stream is going to be like with it. But at the moment, the views and that are all up since I've been doing it a lot more. But the problem is I never know with something like YouTube if it's just for a month, if it's going to be like, oh, it's just going to plateau and then go down. Because as soon as I didn't do a couple of streams for a couple of days where I was ill, my views went down massively. So they went from being at like 30 to 80 something thousand a day to going to about 17,000 a day. But that's way up from 5,000 odd views a day that it was before. But again, YouTube can suddenly get really funny with you if you're doing a good schedule and then you have to stop for whatever reason. Yeah, cheers. Thank you, James. But yeah, like I said, what I'm hoping for is that, again, I'm seeing some friends. I've booked the tickets now and everything. At the back end of February, I'm visiting some friends in another part of the country. And that was one of those things I could never fucking arrange that. Again, there's a Chinese version of the SHUM 41, so maybe you've got the Chinese version. I don't know, is the answer to that. But there's so many variants of that mask, and like licensed copies and unlicensed copies. So yeah, so up until that point, I'm not going to look for anything because the problem was when I was working, I couldn't ever get the holiday and sort out to visit them. So a lot of stuff I want to do in terms of seeing mates and that, I'm getting done in the next month or two. Like I said, I want to clear out a load of this shit. So before I start looking for any work, I'm definitely going to start selling off a load of this stuff, because then that brings in a bit of money and it clears up space. And it means I don't have the problem that, you have days you're at work and then somebody wants to buy something. I have to look some of those up, Kevin. I know they had like a load of old British style ones, but I know they as well. Like I said, I know with guns and that they had a load of like Mad Max stuff. Literally, one of the first things that's come up is a BTR 152. But yeah, Leopard security vehicle's pretty cool. That's like a very mine-resistant hull, isn't it? Where it's raised up and in a V shape. But yeah, speaking of the BTR 152. Yeah, a captured BTR put into service in the Rhodesian army. So one of the commie countries obviously provided Mugabe's lot look with one of these. And yeah, they've obviously put a BTR 152 into service. As I said, talking about those just earlier. Like I said, 152s, Israel used those when they captured. I think everybody really liked the BTR 152. And again, I'm surprised we haven't seen those turn up in Ukraine. But I reckon the reason for that is that the Soviets probably sold all theirs off. That, you know, they no longer have any that they can press gang into service. Because we've seen fucking old BTR 50s turn up in service, but not the one, not BTR 40s and not the BTR 152, which I'm kind of surprised of. But it's just probably they don't have any anymore. Yeah, Saracens are cool. Like I said, Saracens and Saladins and ferret armored cars. They forced me had me cornered. I won't do all the lyrics to that. If you know, you know what I was doing there. But like I said, the Humber Pig's the one I like. But the Humber Pig, although most of the articles keep going on about Northern Ireland, there are pictures of like British troops of it in West Germany, you know, during the Cold War. And I think other nations bought them to then use in peacekeeping operations and that. Do you know, Myra is a lot more overpriced because you could buy an OM90 on eBay for less money than Myra sell. Yeah, Myra. Yeah, a comrade on my left and another one on my right. Yes, you knew. Yes. But I'm wondering, is my little Armalite an AR-15 or an AR-18? Because there's pictures of the IRA with both. Again, I saw somebody selling a US CDV 715, so not even the 700, you know, like the cheaper 715, in Japan selling, and they had more than one of them, $1,000 each. And that was ignoring the shipping price from Japan. But yeah, because yeah, that's the thing. It's apparently, yeah, they had more AR-18s or 180s than AR-15s, even though apparently the 15 is the one that gets used in the media depictions of them more. But anyway, I'm going to go off now because I want to have some food. And now it's gone 9 p.m. I'm assuming that a parcel that was meant to be coming for my mum today and I was meant to sign for hasn't fucking turned up because it still says arriving today. But then if I do see all updates, the last update was at 8:18 a.m. and it doesn't even say out for delivery on that one. So I'm going to check. I'm going to check all around the house that it's not been left anywhere. And then I don't think at this time of day anybody's coming to deliver it now. So, yeah, anyway, have a good evening. And if you've not been watching it, watch what's going on in Iran. Because like I said, a lot of the media isn't covering it very well. But it hopefully might be the end of the Ayatollah. So, well, I know it's Ayatollah 2 at the moment, but, you know, him and his goons, it looks like it's not going very well for them. So I wish the Iranians all the best, the actual Iranian people. Because that is one shitty regime where, you know, the people living there deserve way better than what they've got at the moment. And I'm not saying let's go in there and blow stuff up and ruin another country through, you know, regime changing that. But if the people there themselves, you know, manage to get something better for themselves, I really hope so. Yeah. Sadly, it's not the Ayatollah of rock and roller. Yeah. He didn't appear on TV, did he, and go, just walk away. Let me find a quote before I go off. Lord Humongous. Yeah. There has been too much violence, too much pain. None here are without sin, but I have an honorable compromise. Just walk away. Give me your pump, the oil, the gasoline, and the whole compound, and I'll spare your lives. Just walk away. I will give you safe passage in the wasteland. Just walk away, and there will be an end to the horror. So yeah, why doesn't the Ayatollah just fucking walk away then? But yeah, there we go. But yeah, anyway, I'll go off now, otherwise I'm still going to be caught in the comments. And I want to have some food and that before I go to bed in a bit. So, yeah. Anyway, see you all. Yeah, and like I said, live in the cuck bunker with Assad and Putin. And I reckon Lukashenko is going to be the only smart one and run away from Belarus before it's too late with a load of money, because the Potato King to me seems smarter than all the others. But anyway, see you. Have a good evening and everything. And hopefully be on tomorrow for a stream.